Hello, and welcome to this week's Movie Math, where, before we get to what happened on the charts this week, we're first going to take a trip back in time. Doodaloo, doodaloo, doodaloo. Well, actually, it's just a short trip, so doodaloo, as we look at the 2025 box office. Let's take a look at what happened. So, Disney won the year yet again with a last-minute upset thanks to not one but two huge, reliable hits, especially overseas. My goodness, did these hit overseas. Zootopia 2 and Avatar 3. Bob Iger is all in on sequels for a reason. And in 2026, the mouse has 4 sequels, 1 live-action remake, and is bringing its hit Disney Plus show. Well, it started out as a hit. I think it's still solid. What do you think of the man? It's been a minute since the season 3 that didn't go over so well, but how do you feel about The Mandalorian right now? But that's going to go kind of in the opposite direction. It'll be interesting because Disney Plus has been such a hindrance for the Star Wars and, well, particularly the Marvel franchise. With the big screen to small screen dynamic, it'll be interesting to see The Mandalorian and Grogu try to go in the opposite direction. All right, to be fair though, Disney does have a couple of original films set for 2026, so we'll see how they fare. But speaking of Hollywood machines that are seemingly unstoppable, the 2025 box office numbers show why most of Tinseltown is terrified of Netflix acquiring Warner Brothers. Warner Brothers was the number 2 studio in 2025. Heck, it was number 1 until the holidays hit, with $4.38 billion worldwide and $1.8 billion domestic. It's actually quite close to Disney domestically. And a lot of these movies were original ideas or at least new IP. Imagine this very large slice of the box office pie going away. Netflix is gonna eat that up. Could movie theaters withstand that? Would it be the first domino to fall? You know, Netflix really changed the game when it became such a strong digital streamer and forced all the other studios to get into the streaming space. What might this move do? You might think, oh, only Netflix will do it. But I don't know. I mean, Universal already has the 30 and 17-day window situation, but people were hoping to push the studios in the Disney direction of about, almost 3 months. For a long time now, it has seemed that the only studio that can stand up to Disney is Warner Brothers. Well, as we all know, it's actually Warner Brothers and Universal, the silent ninja in the corner, right? Everyone's always like, oh yeah, Universal. And they always do quite well. If only they'd been able to combine into a single super warrior. But it is not to be. So if these shadows remain unaltered, right? We're close to Christmas. I can do a little Christmas Carol reference. Are we looking at a Hollywood that's just Disney versus Netflix? Something to think about. It's like Sam Rockwell in that upcoming movie. I'm from the future and apocalypse, and that's what Hollywood is. So yeah, today we're looking back at the 2025 box office. But 2026, whew, it has hit the ground running, don't you think? Talk about a whirlwind and everywhere. But we're focusing on the movie and TV space. But it's just been a week. We've gotten a huge trailer, big news stories, big movies and shows, particularly shows. My Night of the Seven Kingdoms review drops on Tuesday. The show itself starts a week from today. And then tonight, the Golden Globes, the second awards show of the year already. I'll be live tweeting tonight, live streaming my thoughts tomorrow. And so with all this that's going on, it's nice to be able to take at least one thing off my plate. And that's what's on my plate. Ooh, that's right. I can eat these little beauties even here at my desk. So what I did from Factor, our friends at Factor, of course. So it just comes in this nice little container. I'll walk it over to the office kitchen, pop it in. This is chicken and mushroom cauliflower rice risotto with green beans. 2 minutes. A warm, healthy, tasty meal that's fresh with real food, not frozen, but good in the refrigerator for a week. I got my box on January 7th, good till the 14th. Fantastic. And you get to pick what kind of meals they send. So coming out of the holidays, I was like, you know what? I want to lean more towards protein, move away from carbs, thus the cauliflower mash. So this is like really, really good. And when I'm grinding out videos, I mean, it takes like 6 to 7 hours to do movie math. And, you got to eat during that period of time. But I don't want to slow down getting the episode out. So but then what do you eat? How do you get a good meal? So instead of having to go to fast food with this, I can enjoy a healthy, still very tasty meal. And you could be enjoying this as well because Factor has a great deal for you. Head to factor75.com or click the link right down below and use code BTTFB50 to get 50% off your first Factor box plus free breakfast for a year. That's 2026 breakfasts taken care of. So again, that's code BTTFB50 at factor75.com to get 50% off your first box plus free breakfast for an entire year. And I got a mushroom there. Oh, delicious. And thanks again to Factor for this great meal, this deal for you, and for sponsoring this episode of Movie Math. Now, let's take a look at that 2025 top 10 worldwide. We'll start out with the worldwide list, where the most interesting thing about it is who's not on it. No Wicked for Good. This is sad because there's really nobody, well, I'm sure there's somebody hating on Wicked down below, but for the most part, with other franchises, there's people are for and against it. So it's kind of like, there's like a celebration either way, right? Like, you know what I'm talking about, Marvel, DC, Star Wars. But for Wicked for Good, it's just sad. So yeah, last year, the first film was number 5 on the worldwide top 10, but this year couldn't even make it. The sequel is running more than 200 million behind the first film. Will that slow down or stop Universal's plans for Wicked theme park experiences or more Wicked movies, sequels, prequels, or spin-offs? I don't know. It is very strong, but more than 200 million behind. I mean, they're certainly going to have a meeting. They're like, what do you think happened? What do you think happened? Wicked, and it could get worse. Wicked won 3 Critics' Choice Awards last year, including one for John M. Chu, his one director win at a big awards show. That was a big deal. But so Critics' Choice loves Wicked. This year, nothing. We'll see how it fares tonight at the Golden Globes, which again, I'll be live tweeting. Superman fans were thrilled though, because Wicked for Good faltering meant that the James Gunn, the first movie that he made for his DC, was able to remain in the top 10. What is this, sports? I feel like we're bracketing, right? We're like, we made the playoffs anyway, even though our team didn't do good. I love it. I'm starting to get into football. All right, so anyway, it's very slow getting into football, but it's happening. Go Steelers. We have a game on Monday night. We made the playoffs. All right. But that was able to say in the worldwide top 10, something not a single Marvel movie could do. That's right, not a single Marvel movie here, even though they made 3 of them in 2025. Fantastic Four came the closest at number 12, with Captain America Brave New World at number 17 and Thunderbolts right behind it at number 18. To be fair, we're trying to be fair here, Fantastic Four was able to chart domestically in the top 10, and as I said, we'll get to that chart in a moment. But while Marvel and Star Wars continue to falter, Disney's other IP makes one heck of a case for studios diversifying their IP portfolios. Why do you think Netflix, why do they want Warner Brothers? For the IP. So back to Disney though, China's Ne Zha 2 is number 1, but right after that, Disney has the next 3 spots. That's amazing. It is interesting though that Avatar 3 seems to have brought the franchise back down to earth. And we'll pause here for those of you to type, leave Avatar alone, Grace. Hey man, the numbers are the numbers, and that's what we talk about here on Movie Math. And Avatar is just a little bit past 1 billion still. I mean, it's climbing. There's certainly more time to go before, maybe even a month before it leaves theaters still. But, it's just not climbing at the rate that the other 2 movies did. Those were like so far ahead of the competition, and it's looking like, forget catching Ne Zha 2, Avatar 3 might not even catch up to Zootopia 2, because Zootopia 2 is just making so much money. Wow. I didn't love Zootopia 2 as much as the first Zootopia, but as a Wild Hops shipper, I'm excited for Zootopia 3, which is, I don't think they actually announced it. Did they? There's such a flurry of news in December, but you know what's happening. I'm very excited about that. Still no word, though, speaking of sequels, of whether or not Jimmy C's going to get to make that Avatar 4 and 5. Is he booking the press conference right now? How do you think it's looking? He's got a pretty big ego. Maybe he doesn't even want to keep making them if they're not clearing $2 billion. He's like, you guys don't even like it as much anymore. I'm taking my toys and going home. we'll see what he decides to do. I would think they would announce that pretty soon to try and boost the box office even more. Like, you couldn't kill Avatar, haters. It's still going to continue, so you might as well acquiesce and go and see it in theaters, or go see it again because you're getting the 4th and 5th entries. Now, there are 2 animated films out of Asia here in the worldwide top 10. Pretty impressive, making, as I said, Paramount's recent decision to send the Aang movie directly to streaming super weird. I'm just telling you, I think it must be because the movie, as I told you before, it must be super, woke for them to do that. Because that's what they did to the Korra show. But they couldn't kill Korra either. It thrived on streaming. And it's such good content. People will find it. Animation is really doing well, though. 3 movies here are animated, including the top 2. Avatar is technically animated, and then another 2 movies here are based on animation. Animation and video games. Sounds pretty good to me. Whatever happened to comic books, man? Hollywood ran them into the ground. Watch out, animation and video games. That could happen to you. But this shows a huge cultural shift, not just in Hollywood, but I think in pop culture in general. With Asian culture huge, also on streaming, which Netflix, as I've told you before, is responsible for. Is that a good thing Netflix did? It's a good thing, I think, for society and, varying product and opening up the marketplace. But, this is the kind of disruption that Hollywood is talking about. Hollywood used to have a death grip on the box office, even globally. And now, because of moves like Netflix only, that's funny, does Netflix care about Hollywood? I think it sees itself as an outlier and does not care about Hollywood. I think Netflix does not care. I think Netflix is a tech company. And that's interesting. That is very interesting. Whereas I think studios have some sense of responsibility and Hollywood history and things like that. What do you think? Never thought of that before. All right. And then, of course, video games. So many of you are like, finally. So video games just keep getting bigger and bigger. For example, 171 million people watched the Game Awards this year, which is laughable when you compare it to the Oscars. Like, it makes the Oscars look so bad in terms of viewership, even when the Oscars were at their highest point. And it's super accessible thanks to being available online with streaming. And I wonder if YouTube included this number. The Game Awards airs on YouTube, also Twitch and other things. But when they pitched to get the Oscars, and they did get it starting in 2029, they were like, look at the Game Awards compared to your puny numbers. The Game Awards, by the way, allows co-streams. And I do wonder if we would maybe be able to, in 2029, co-stream the Oscars. But then, of course, would there be enough interest? A lot of more people are interested in the video games that are being celebrated at the Game Awards than the movies that are being celebrated at the Oscars. Speaking of interest, F1 is on here because of its international appeal as a sport, whereas domestically, still not firing on all cylinders. It is the lowest domestic total of any Hollywood movie on this chart. You would think it would never even get on this chart if it was just relying on domestic interest. Although it's a global marketplace these days. And I think that, by the way, I think that applies to video games as well. Very popular globally. So very interesting how pop culture is evolving. But now, like Disney, Warner Brothers has 3 movies on this chart, while Universal has 2. The good old dependable Jurassic franchise, even when it doesn't do as well as it should, the last 3 made $1 billion. It's very close and still did quite well. And then, thanks to copying a page from Disney's playbook with their own live-action remake of an animated film. Paramount fell just outside the top 10 with the Mission Impossible Final Reckoning, while Sony, well, at least they released Demon Slayer outside of Japan. Tough year for Sony. They also sold K-pop Demon Hunters to Netflix because they didn't believe it would do well in theaters. Although I don't know if it would have blown up in theaters the same way as it did on streaming. But very interesting, very interesting. Worked out great for K-pop Demon Hunters. With the domestic top 10 for 2025, you can really see how much the overseas box office is helping Disney, with Zootopia 2 only at number 5 here and Avatar at the bottom. I mean, Avatar 2 back in 2022 was only number 4 domestically, but at the bottom, I mean, again, Avatar 3 still has a little bit of ways to go, but even hardcore Avatar fans have to admit that's kind of surprising. I think Avatar has lost some of its luster domestically, even if it is still a big franchise overseas. I mean, that's enough. It's cleared $1 billion, but considering how expensive the movie is, and it's no longer an awards darling, Is it? Very interesting. Again, we'll see when and if they announce those sequels. Wicked and Marvel fans, can breathe a sigh of relief that they made the domestic chart at least, while Sinners is here as well. Sinners, it's percolating a little bit in the award space. It's getting some more nominations than were expected, and it's starting to get some wins. I think that Sinners, don't count it out in the award space just yet. And again, it'll be interesting to see what happens tonight. But the real winner here is Superman with a very impressive 354.1 domestic, a bigger domestic total than any DC movie besides 4. Wonder Woman, The Batman, and of course, Nolan's 2 Dark Knight films. Is Superman as a character the problem with international audiences? Lack of star power in the movie, perhaps? Or is it the tone from James Gunn? Yet then, although this is interesting, the Guardians of the Galaxy movies performed about the same domestically. So James Gunn does very well with American audiences or North American audiences. But why did Guardians of the Galaxy do so much better overseas than Superman did? Was it the Superman character being very American, despite how DC and James Gunn have tried to rebrand him? Is it that Marvel was at the heyday, and so that was a very strong international brand, perhaps? Or maybe his Superman just seemed like a little bit of a smaller movie, perhaps? Although I think that Matt Reeves' The Batman feels equally as small, and yet that made more and did better and made about 100 million more. How can Gunn get his DC international numbers to go up? As for this weekend's top 10, Avatar Fire and Ash is still number 1 for the 4th week in a row. But will it get unseated this coming weekend? Because you see, 28 Years Later opened back in June with 30 million, although it was coming off of one of the best trailers ever made and a lot of buzz. But it didn't really materialize. Some people liked it. I think we all agree it wasn't as good as its trailer. But 28 Years Later, The Bone Temple, which hits theaters this weekend, only needs to do about 20 because Avatar is going to continue to drop, even if it's just by a little bit. So if the Bone Temple can come in 10 million lower even, it still has a shot at unseating Avatar from the top spot, which would be great for Nia DaCosta and a really great comeback after what unfortunately happened, the way things went down with the Marvels. A film which, wasn't what it needed to be from a business perspective, but I think was a better film than it seemed from its trailers. And I think people were unfair with it, especially considering that they were okay with the silliness in James Gunn's Marvel Cosmic movies. Then it was a photo finish with the next 3 movies. The order could change once the official numbers come in tomorrow, but regardless, all 3 of these movies look very good. Primate's debut is pretty standard for a January horror release, in line with 2024's Night Swim and last year's Wolfman. Megan gave Hollywood hope for horror in January with a 30 million debut back in 2023, but then Universal and Jason Blum really nerfed that IP. But it just goes to show that maybe they should have kept it in January. I think they got a little too excited about that 30 million debut and tried to make Megan something that would, they broke the contract they'd made with the audience. Sometimes that works, but sometimes it doesn't. But there are 2 things, back to Primate, that make it stand out. 1, while its Rotten Tomato scores are nothing of note and are somewhat weak, they're not rotten though. Its cinema score is very impressive for a horror film. That Primate got a B-, that's amazing, meaning that Primate could do very well on digital and streaming down the line, and that it pleased the kind of people who want to see a chimpanzee rip people's faces off. So that leads me to number 2. After the growing success of the Terrifier franchise, remember Terrifier 3 managed to open at number 1, in an entertainment landscape and social media landscape where shocking content is needed to cut through all the noise, clearly there is an audience, a mainstream audience emerging for extreme gore and kills. Now, the Terrifier franchise has benefited from being independent, but it's interesting to see a major studio, in this case Paramount, start to move into this space. Has experienced horror producer Walter Hamada, in fact, spotted a trend and capitalized on it? And how far can studios go in this space? What's your threshold for gore and kills in horror movies? And do they mean as much to you coming from a studio as they do from some independent group like the group behind Terrifier? Primate skewed male, but not too male. It's only 58%. Younger and with a very diverse turnout. And wow, Sydney Sweeney has definitely had a rough time of it as of late, and for a while she's been having a rough time. But she never gave up, she held her head high, and now she has a huge hit. Amanda Seyfried's part of this as well, but I think because everybody thought Sydney Sweeney was done, she's really getting the lion's share of the credit here. And speaking of lions, Lionsgate has just greenlit a sequel for the film, which is just about to cross the century mark domestic. For a movie like The Housemaid, and considering how many movies these days with bigger talent attached doesn't get to the century mark, that's amazing. And the movie is showing no signs of slowing down with just a 26% drop in its fourth weekend. Lionsgate hasn't announced a digital release date yet. Sometimes it's a surprise. Sometimes they're like, surprise, The Housemaid. But maybe we'll see. I think, it was suspected it would go on digital sometime this month, but maybe they should wait until February and let it play out in theaters the way it is. What would you do if you were Lionsgate? Universal sometimes puts movies on digital and they still continue to do well in theaters. A24 has set Marty Supreme to go on digital February 3rd, and this movie is also holding up pretty well. It's about to surpass A Complete Unknown's domestic total. I wouldn't say it's a runaway hit, but it's doing quite well. Some feel, though, that announcing a February 3rd release date will hurt it at the box office. I disagree. I think Marty Supreme will continue to get noms and wins throughout this award season, which lasts all the way through the Oscars in March. And going to digital and then HBO Max, which is A24's deal, will keep it in the online conversation. It'll keep it from fading away. A24 isn't just trying to make money here. They also want to win awards. There's a lot going on. And the Oscar voting, a lot of awards bodies are almost done voting. But the Oscars, they haven't even started. They haven't even announced their nominations. I think that voting is done, though, or almost done. But they still have the round of actual voting for the winners to go. Remember, Amazon really blew up Saltburn, a movie that has kind of a similar vibe, when they put it on their own Prime Video. Marty Supreme is already on track to be A24's biggest domestic release of all time. And it's not really even playing worldwide yet, which is why it's worldwide, it's a little bit lower. That's right. It doesn't go into international markets for the most part until late January, February, where that digital release, maybe that's the issue, because there might be a lot of piracy. But for the most part, piracy does not hurt. Films, there's piracy, and films still manage to do quite well. But we'll see. We'll see if Timmy wins again tonight at the Golden Globes. That'll really be something. And I'm sure that's one of the reasons that A24 has held the film overseas, because they want to release it by being able to say that Timothée Chalamet is the best actor of the year. I know some of you like to point to Marty Supreme's huge budget and and advertising budget as an issue, but prestige flicks have different expectations from their studios. That's why One Battle After Another and Marty Supreme are bullseyes for their respective studios. And thank goodness they are, because it takes a lot of money these days to make a movie that can compete with IP. And, I think One Battle After Another and Marty Supreme, they're my two favorite movies of the year. And I think they're keeping the art aspects of this business alive. So I think that's worth the money as well. Again, Netflix, do they care? Companies like that maybe don't care, but studios still do care about the legacy of Hollywood. So they feel it's an investment in the future of the business. As for the rest of the top 10, Greenland 2's opening is a bit low for Gerard Butler. His movies usually open in the double digits, but not bad considering the first one came out during the pandemic and was direct to video. Also, though, to be fair, these days when everybody thinks about Greenland, they think about something else. So maybe the timing also was not great. Meanwhile, Anaconda, SpongeBob, and Song Sung Blue can at least say they haven't embarrassed themselves at theaters, but clearly audiences feel these are movies to watch on digital and maybe even further down the line on streaming. David, the religious animated film from Angel Studios, has outperformed all of them, at least domestically. I do believe Anaconda worldwide is a little bit ahead. Moving over to streaming, starting with Nielsen per usual for the second week in December, I've got good news and bad news. The good news is that Welcome to Derry is back on the charts. But the bad news is that Heated Rivalry still isn't here. And I know that so many of you are eager for me to give it its flowers. Hold on just a moment. I'm going to give it some flowers. But first, Welcome to Derry. The reason it's back on these charts is that this was the week that the season wrapped, so it's getting a huge binge bump. So much so that it didn't just show up on the acquired chart. I don't know why this is considered an acquired show, but it's on the overall chart, which is amazing. And if it was on the originals chart, where I would assume it should be, it would be number 4, which is excellent. Still no word on a season 2 renewal. What is going on over there? Part of me feels maybe it's because of the impending Warner Brothers Netflix deal, right? Maybe they're only moving forward with projects right now that have already been greenlit. Because what would a season 2 of Welcome to Derry look like? Because it would probably be airing on Netflix, right? I mean, we don't know. I don't think HBO will remain its own streaming service. I think it would get folded into Netflix and become more of a brand than a streaming. And what would that look like for Welcome to Derry? Would it remain a weekly show, or would it be turned into a binge? And that would mean also maybe potentially no back end, right? Because Netflix really doesn't put its product out for purchase, whereas Welcome to Derry, because Zazie loves to make a buck wherever he can, Welcome to Derry is available now on digital, where it's been doing well. So those deals have to totally be reworked for Netflix financials, for talent in front of and behind the camera. So, all right, so no heated rivalry. Now, and it's not even on the Acquired chart, because that's a Canadian show that airs on HBO Max. And the bar is pretty low on Acquired. You know, some of you were saying Acquired, those shows are so popular and have so many episodes, they set the bar quite high. You can see it doesn't take much to get onto the Acquired chart. But as many of you have noted who are fans of Heated Rivalry, the show didn't really gain momentum until about mid-season. So there's still time for it to show up on Nielsen. However, without a doubt, Heated Rivalry is certainly making headlines, far more so than Interview with the Vampire was able to do in its earlier seasons, which really points out how important it is what service you're on. AMC isn't what it used to be, while HBO can really do a glow-up. Although, of course, nobody does a glow-up like Netflix, though. But maybe Heated Rivalry's success can help the upcoming season of Lestat this summer, which is already doing better. As you might recall, at Comic-Con this past year, with no Marvel or DC, that gave other IP the chance to shine, and Lestat was able to trend on Twitter when it had its panel. You know, for those saying that LGBT and female fans aren't valuable to big franchises like Marvel, DC, and Star Wars, well, you can see you're wrong, because they really are able to hype projects up. And I would say ways that I don't think any other fandom can. Maybe also Brazil, right? Which has some crossover with the LGBT and female fandom. So that to me is very interesting. And I mean, why do you think Wanda gets all the attention that she does? Overall, Landman and Knives Out are both quite strong, right? While Stranger Things was going very well. This is between volumes 1 and 2. So on that note, let's go take a look at Netflix's charts. So these charts are for just last week, when the series finale for Stranger Things dropped. And you would think it would kick these viewership numbers into the stratosphere, but they still just look like business as usual. For Stranger Things, granted, but still business as usual. However, this was dropped during the holidays, and so I do wonder for you guys, how many of you watched these Stranger Things, volume 1, volume 2, and the series finale as soon as they dropped? Or did it take you a couple of days to get to them because it was during the busy holiday season, Thanksgiving, Christmas, and New Year's? Stranger Things 5, though, has already made it onto the all-time chart at number 9 and counting, joining season 4, which is at number 3. Now, with 105 views, just as the series finale has dropped, and 31.3 million views for this latest week, I think it's very clear that it will be able to get to the top of this list very quickly. It just needs another 20 million views to clear Wednesday season 2, and another 40 or so to clear Stranger Things 4 and Adolescence. So I think it's very likely, almost guaranteed, that it'll end up at number 2 on this chart. But it's not going to be able to surpass Wednesday season 1. Isn't that interesting? Look, they're both purple, by the way, but there's more similarities between these two. So Wednesday season 1 and K-pop Demon Hunters are Netflix's biggest hits in shows and movies, respectively. Isn't that interesting, right? Both are edgy, fun, female-led content, right? With a little bit of Halloween flair to both of them. Oh, wow. What would you say are some of the similarities between the two? Imagine you're a Netflix exec or maybe a studio exec for somebody else. How do you repeat their success? All right, back to shows. Harlan Coben is still a huge brand for Netflix with another hit series based on his novels, while Emily in Paris is still going strong, and it makes total sense that it just got renewed for a 6th season. Meanwhile, shock jocks Ricky Gervais and Dave Chappelle, who say whatever they want, they don't care what you think, aren't getting people to tune in with solid numbers for stand-up. They're not blowing things up either, but they're doing very well. With movies, true crime is still also a hot ticket for Netflix, while Knives Out continues to do well. A Knives Out movie, though, has never made the all-time top 10 list on Netflix Netflix, despite the fact they paid $400 million for the both of them. And speaking of the financials of Netflix deals, both Rian Johnson and Daniel Craig have said they'd like to keep making these. And I think a lot of us would like to see them keep making Knives Out movies. But where do you go from a $400 million contract? How much of a pay cut would Johnson and Craig be willing to take? Would it be less embarrassing? What would be more embarrassing? To get substantially less for Knives Out 4 or to not make a Knives Out 4? I guess, they're going to play chicken with the Netflix executives, I guess. But, these aren't getting huge viewership numbers, and they're not even big awards winners or in the awards conversation that much anymore. So I don't think the original value is still there. What do you think? Then on digital, I'm so happy to see it. There's Predator Badlands at number 1. Did you check it out finally? Did you like it after all? Such a good movie. While the rest of the top 10 is a lot of other recent theatrical releases. But a shout out to One Battle After Another, which is still going very strong, despite now being also on HBO Max. Although, again, we suspect they might not have that many subscribers. But anyway, it will only get stronger as the award season goes on, as they're winning a lot of awards. It's pretty much considered a lock for Best Picture. We'll see what happens tonight. And yes, Eternity. A lot of you I've seen also saying, talk about Eternity. Well, Eternity has been in the top 10 here for a very long time. A badly needed win for Elizabeth Olsen and Miles Teller. It's interesting to think of Elizabeth Olsen compared to Sydney Sweeney. Sydney Sweeney is surrounded by a lot of drama. But people are talking about Sydney Sweeney, and they're not talking about Elizabeth Olsen. I think Elizabeth Olsen has had a tough time, maybe it seems, with Marvel, and she really I think she feels the loss of no longer being considered a prestige actress. Before she signed on with Marvel, one of the things that helped her get the deal with Marvel was that she was considered an up-and-coming serious actress. So where is that aspect of her career? But at this point, things are going so poorly for Olsen, I think she just needs to get in there like Sydney Sweeney is getting in there. Just get in there like a bulldozer. And at least get people talking about you. I mean, I hope she returns as Wanda sooner rather than later. Is there a point where the return of Wanda could be too late? Or are you just like, whenever, man, we'll wait for as long as it takes? And while Greenland 2 isn't very impressive in theaters, it did get people to watch the first movie here on digital, as it's just outside of the top 10. As for this coming week, as I've been saying throughout this entire video, the Golden Globes are tonight. We'll see if the Critics' Choice winners gain momentum by getting more wins here, or maybe the field will go back to being open as a couple of other people get a second chance at maybe competing for the Oscar. I'll be live tweeting the show. We're going to have such a good time, and then doing a live stream breakdown tomorrow, Monday. In theaters, 28 years later, The Bone Temple again looks to unseat Avatar 3 on Friday, while Dead Man's Wire and A Private Life try to make some money in January. Also, the Lord of the Rings trilogy is getting a limited re-release in theaters, like one showing a day or something like that. On digital on Tuesday, there's Song Sung Blue, sure enough, and also Rental Family. And then as for streaming movies, Netflix has a really big one on Friday, The R.I.P., with Ben Affleck and Matt Damon. I'm definitely watching that. That looks great. Finally, they have some really good streaming movies this month. Prime Video has a great Jason Momoa, Dave Bautista one, I think, like at the end of the month. Movies that kind of maybe should be in theaters, don't you think? I think I would have seen both of these movies in theaters. Finally, with shows, tonight, The Night Manager is back on Prime Video with a 3-episode drop, while Industry returns on HBO. Night of the Seven Kingdoms is next Sunday, and the review embargo lifts Tuesday evening, so we're excited to talk to you about that. And Primal is also back on Adult Swim. Tell Me Lies starts at season 3 on Hulu on Tuesday. Who even knew there was a season 1 and 2? While on Wednesday, Hijack is back. And I, in fact, got screeners for this entire season, watched the whole thing, and it's excellent. If you like the first season of Hijack, you are in for another treat. They make being trapped on the subway for 8 episodes surprisingly engaging. Then on Thursday, Paramount Plus launches another Star Trek show, this time Starfleet Academy, their answer to Gen V. I hope it goes better than Gen V went. That's too bad. I really liked the first season of Gen V and elements of Gen V season 2. Well, Netflix has a new thriller based on an Agatha Christie novel, and Peacock has Ponies, which, despite the name, is actually somewhat intriguing. This is a 1970s spy thriller with pretty darn good behind-the-scenes talent. And look at that cast. That's Emilia Clarke and Haley Lou Richardson. Could be good. And that's this week's Movie Math. What have you been watching? What do you plan to watch? And again, how do you feel about the 2025 box office now that the year has wrapped?